Speaking of the offensive line and getting into some of the cons now, this is where I got caught up because what the Bills have done to their offensive line is something that I call patchwork. Now, I know that I talked about this last week, but I'm going to say it again because it fits and it segues into the question that I want to present for tonight's show. And that's the analogy that I often use to describe this is fixing a road. So think of any road at the end of the winter, which ironically enough falls during the same time as the NFL offseason. What does it mainly consist of? Potholes. And that's pretty much how I see the Bills' offensive line, where you look at them at the end of the regular season and then the end of the postseason, and there's a lot of splotchy holes around where, yeah, you have guys like Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, and probably Spencer Brown coming back as a starter. So the road isn't in that rough of shape, but still, there are a lot of potholes that need to get patched up. And that's a word that you have to be careful with, patching, because using that analogy, what do the street departments and the highway departments normally do when they have to fix a road? They patch those holes with the blacktop, and sometimes it holds throughout the whole summer. And you say, okay, good, we don't really have to do any more work here. But other times that blacktop does not hold, and you say, man, we really didn't value the road for what it was. We kind of underestimated the condition that it was in, and maybe we should have just put down that fresh coat of pavement. And that's how I see this Bills offensive line here. Because going into free agency, I was hoping that the Bills were going to draft a guard early and then use the money to sign a veteran right tackle to give Spencer Brown some much needed competition. But they've pretty much done the opposite as they now have four guards who you can pretty much pencil in on the depth chart and no offensive tackles who present a real threat to taking Spencer Brown's job. And Questenberry, yeah, maybe that's competition, but it's really more depth as Questenberry is going to be 33 years old once the season starts. And he's coming off a season in which he allowed 4 sacks and 396 snaps for a 59.3 PFF grade. So again, that's just more of a depth signing. He's going to be a camp body. There's not a lot of guarantees in the contract. So the Bills have really been patching their line once again, and that's something that they've been doing ever since trading away Wyatt Teller in 2019. Guys like Quinton Spain, Brian Winters, John Feliciano, Darrell Williams, Roger Saffold, Greg Van Roten, Bobby Hart, even if you want to throw him in there. But they pretty much chose to go that route again this spring. And you can look at that and say, well, McGovern and Edwards are probably better than any of the other guys that I previously mentioned. And you're right. Again, taking a look at the pros, you think that McGovern is a solid signing. Same with David Edwards. But really, that's just stronger blacktop to try to keep the road together. Not to mention, all these guys who are backups are going to be free agents again next offseason. So you might have your starters figured out, but what are you going to do behind them? So again, that's where the patching comes into play. And here's the thing, too. The four guards on the Bills roster right now, between McGovern, Bates, Edwards, and Butker, account for $14.8 million in terms of average annual value for the 2023 season. So not only are they taking up roster spots, but they're also taking away from being able to spend on different positions. And I shouldn't say they're taking up roster spots because I just got done saying how they're solid moves, but you understand where I'm coming from now, because if you have four guards on your roster, that decreases the likelihood that you're going to draft that guard of the future. Because at this point, it would be kind of redundant if you were to draft Osiris Torrance and you say, well, why do we have five guards who could potentially start here? And now we really need a right tackle, or we really need that wide receiver too. Or more importantly, we really need that starting middle linebacker. So that pretty much leads into the main question for tonight's show. And you can probably tell because I wrote the article on it. That was in the tweet. That was on the YouTube link here. But are the Bills drafting defense early again?